Horror has never fared too well with the Academy. In fact, only 6 horror films have ever been nominated for Best Picture. Ever. 3 of them, it's even iffy if they're really horror films. I don't know what it is, maybe it's that horror is seen as lowbrow by the snobs at the top. 2020 marks the 92nd Academy Awards, meaning that out of 92 chances to include one of the most trailblazing and lucrative genres, they only did so 6 times. The Exorcist, Jaws, Silence of the Lambs, The Sixth Sense, Black Swan, and Get Out. And out of those 6, only 1 has ever taken home the big boy. The Silence of the Lambs did it. While gleefully welcomed in the horror community, Mr. Hannibal's first big break wasn't even really horror by definition. It was a crime drama with horror elements. Of course we're gonna call it horror because it is, but the Academy definitely didn't say, oh man, we have to vote this horror movie in. It probably went a little more like, we'll call it a psychological thriller and we'll make sure we really talk up Anthony Perkins. Again, I believe Silence deserves every ounce of praise it receives, but I can't imagine folks not doing some mental gymnastics in order to include it in the world's premier award show. Horror and awards has been a hot topic lately, especially with this year's nominees being announced. Another year, another mass snubbing of incredible performances from horror films. I think the biggest talking point right now is Lupita Nyong'o's lack of recognition for her not 1, but 2 roles in Jordan Peele's Us. I will err on the side of history and point out the fact that many of the most iconic, legendary films of all time did not get 1 single Oscar nomination, and yet, here we are still discussing them today. Art is not contingent upon winning awards, and if it affected you, then it did its job. Hello horror heads and welcome back to the Scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. I'm your horror host, Keegan Hughes, and today we're counting down the top 5 horror movies that should have won Oscars. Before we get started, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe if you want more Hollywood heresy. Let the snubbing begin. Kicking us off at number 5, we've got The Exorcist. Of course, we're gonna open this list with the first Best Picture nominated horror. Unfortunately, it lost at The Sting, where Paul Newman and Robert Redford pulled off an insane amount of conning in a relatively limited amount of time. But who is regularly talking about The Sting these days? The Exorcist reigns supreme in relevance. It actually did win Oscars for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Sound Mixing, but The Exorcist deserves more than that. Unlike many other classic horror gems, William Friedkin's Possession Parable was critically acclaimed since the day it came out. It was praised for its in-depth examination of the Roman Catholic faith, among other things. It had lots of fun controversies surrounding the production as well, with stories of people dying during production, unconventional directing methods, and more. People believed the movie was cursed, which on its own doesn't make it Oscar worthy, but definitely adds some compelling backstory to the campaign. On top of that, the film took controversial subject matter and made it impossible to look over as simply schlock. This was a momentous movie that took horror and brought it to the eyes of a more discerning, possibly snobbish community of filmgoers. Demonic possession, a realistic cerebral angiography, masturbating with a crucifix. These on-screen events scandalized the public, but also drew them into a complex film about evil and the human experience. The overarching themes didn't prevent audience members from puking, fainting, having heart attacks, and developing supposed neuroses though. If nothing else, this film is iconic. The priest in silhouette is forever burned into the minds of cinema goers everywhere. How many times has the head-twisting scene been recreated? The Library of Congress selected it in 2010 to be preserved as part of its National Film Registry, as culturally, historically, and aesthetically relevant. I think Roger Ebert describes it best when he says, "It forces us to look inside, to experience horror, to confront the reality of human suffering." Coming in at number 4, Alien. Okay, again, this one did take home a couple awards, visual effects and production design, which were both well deserved, but still, I will not stop campaigning until every horror movie has a Best Picture statuette with its name on it. Retroactive awards for horror. We're running a reparations campaign for it. Alien did have a tough year for Best Picture, and even if it were nominated, it would have been up against Kramer vs. Kramer and Apocalypse Now. Those are scary in their own unique ways, and honestly, there's no beating Streep during awards season. It just doesn't happen. So we'll just discuss the merits of Alien as we would had we not known it would have to take down Meryl Streep. For starters, Alien was revolutionary stuff at the time. No space opera, no goofy alien exploitation. This was some hard science fiction in this flick. The story of a bunch of contractors who just want to get paid and go home. They didn't opt in for this alien hunting adventure, no. This angle lets the movie take on a slower pace, where we get to see each character's personality a bit before they're eviscerated by the xenomorph. Well-paced and intelligent sci-fi shouldn't go unnoticed, and thankfully Alien didn't. I actually read a review of Alien earlier that claimed it was a hidden gem, and I just had to laugh. On top of being well paced and well written, it was also the origin of the classic screenwriting trick, save the cat. I think Alien should get a Lifetime Achievement Award just for that contribution to the filmmaking scene at large. Ripley could just leave the ship like the cool, calm, collected crusader she is, but instead she opts to go back for Jonesy, endearing her to film buffs the world over. And speaking of Ripley, Sigourney should have been at least nominated for this performance. She proves her versatility here, coming off as hardened, intelligent, and compassionate, all while making the kind of decisions folks wish protagonists would take in other horror. Filling out a number 3 spot, Hereditary. Toni Collette was snubbed. Just like Lupita in Us, Toni showed us an incredible range in Ari Aster's 2018 horror Hellride. Not even a nomination though, come on the Academy. Her psychotic breakdown in this flick is incredible. The terse, reserved guilt after her mother passes, unwilling to open up, reluctant to show any of the mourning and relief that she was feeling. The floodgates open up following Charlie's death though, in an absolutely devastating portrayal of maternal grief. After this, she descends into a sort of manic trip, discovering little details hinting at the bigger picture while her son and husband helplessly look on. Then we get the classic horror stuff, the incineration of people by accident, the crawling across the ceiling. There aren't many notes she doesn't hit here. Maybe a light-hearted comedic scene was missing for the entire emotional range, but for the purposes of the film, her performance was pitch perfect. Not even a nomination. Shame. The directing deserves a nod as well, masterfully mixing tense family drama and demonic horror. Rosemary's Baby meets Ordinary People, both of which have Oscars by the way. This flick burns slow at first, but as it builds, there are releases along the way. What I had assumed was the biggest shock in the movie was actually around the midway point. Every time it slows down to build, it pays off in spades. All the clues are there, all the strange happenings have motivation. It's beautifully shot too, but that's just as an aside. Aster should have got a nomination for writing or directing or something. If it's not a psychological thriller, it's not making it all the way, I guess. Coming in at number 2, The Shining. This one is insane to me. Hindsight is 2020, sure, but this movie received 0 nominations for anything. It was actually awarded with 2 Razzies, the Bad Movie Awards. One for Worst Director, Kubrick, and one for Worst Actress, Duvall. You know that meme with the guy looking at the camera and there's all those question marks around his head? Yeah, that's how I feel. If that doesn't speak to the ineptitude of awards committees, then I don't know what does. In fact, Kubrick never won a single Oscar for directing. He was nominated plenty of times and even scored Best Visual Effects for 2001, but how the hell did Barry Lyndon not snag a win? I'm spiraling, I'm sorry. The Shining is a classic experimental tour de force of a horror flick. While watching it often encourages you to wonder what reality really is. Whose perspective is reliable? Is anyone still sane? Is it them or the Overlook? Complex, intricate, and unhinged, I can't imagine a serious critic watching this and thinking that it was just plain bad. I get that it almost reaches points of incoherence, but The Shining is deliberately brought to the edge. It walks a fine line. So many choices were made to ensure that the hotel was confusing and paranoia-inducing. And people realize this. It's been dissected over and over every year since. I guess the folks at the Academy just couldn't see it yet. And finally, at number 1, Psycho. At this point, I don't even know what to say. Hitchcock never got an Academy Award. Okay, sure, he was presented with the Irving G. Thalberg Memorial Award, but that's basically the good folks behind the scenes saying, whoops, sorry, we never really celebrated your contributions and achievements during your multi-decade career. Here's a little prize to say we messed up. He was nominated a few times too, but it never went through all the way. Psycho is his most impactful film for sure. He understood filmmaking down to its bare essence. It wasn't a phenomenal performance or a prescient message that made his films connect with people, no. It was the craft of the filmmaking itself. He should have easily won Best Director over and over. And Psycho could have definitely been considered for Best Picture too, but it's criminal that Hitchcock never got a Best Director nod. It's wild. Hitchcock made all the right decisions with Psycho, from the cheap exploitation look to the careful misdirection throughout to really bring home the twist. Sure, we all know the story now, but first-time watchers had to assume that Marion Crane's story would be the thread that takes you through the whole movie. By introducing the money as a red herring and allowing our protagonist to bite the dust early, Norman Bates becomes the unlikely protagonist. This clever directorial choice touches our deepest fears, that we may commit a crime on impulse, that we may be killed by a madman, or that we may become the madman ourselves. The fact that the movie was so sensational when it came out probably blinded the voters to the true power of Psycho. It's a yearly tradition. Get mad at the Oscars. Ain't nothing quite like it. What do you think? Any other horrors that deserve the tiny gold statue? What movies do you think deserve to be nominated this year? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more retrospective ones from Top 5 SCP Monsters That Can Never Escape, Part 8. Zgream Top 5 says, "Can't stop thinking about Monsters Inc. Lol." When it comes to SCPs, I always look to Mike Wazowski's timeless advice. Put that thing back where it came from, or so help me. Daire Jeffries says, "The SCP is real. Watch 10 years from now, it's all gonna come out. I've got my bug out bag and panic room all set up, just in case. Not that it'll help much, but it feels good to prepare." Irish Morgenstern says, "Technically, none of the SCPs should be free. What else are you thinking about doing with them? I feel like some SCPs could have useful industrial applications, maybe even medicinal ones. And I'm sure folks in the comments would absolutely love if 999 were to roam free." Master Taz says, "Plot twist, Keegan is actually 0513. And wait, someone's at the door. Be careful what you say in public, Mr. Taz. D-class awaits." And Adnan Alam says, "Boring. Need to be scarier." Look at Mr. Tough Guy over here. I think you just need to get more scared. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.